Redacted briefing, accessing declassified records. This episode, Project Iceworm. Beneath the frozen surface of Greenland, the United States Army once conceived something extraordinary, a secret. A network of tunnels stretching deep under the ice, designed to hide one of the most ambitious nuclear weapons systems ever imagined. The program had a name, Project Iceworm, and almost no one knew it existed. The scale of what they were planning was almost difficult to comprehend. Up to 600 nuclear missiles hidden beneath the ice, spread across an area 3 times the size of Denmark. Not a single launch pad, not a small installation. An entire subterranean arsenal, invisible from above, buried under hundreds of feet of frozen nothing. The kind of infrastructure that, if it worked, would permanently shift the balance of the Cold War. But none of that could be built in plain sight. You couldn't just start drilling missile tunnels into Greenland's ice sheet and call it a day. So the military did what militaries do when they need cover. They built a story. Officially, what was happening up there was science, research, a harmless outpost of curious minds studying ice and weather. The true purpose stayed buried, just like everything else they were planning to put beneath that frozen surface. Construction began in 1959. The project was called Camp Century, and its stated mission was straightforward: dig into the Greenland ice sheet and see if tunnels could be carved out and kept stable. Could you build inside a glacier? Could you maintain it? Could personnel actually live and operate down there for extended periods? These were the questions Camp Century was designed to answer. On paper, it was an engineering experiment, a proof of concept, but the scale of what they were about to build would go far beyond any simple test. Camp Century grew into something remarkable. At its peak, it housed 200 personnel living and working beneath the ice. 21 separate trenches stretched across 3,000 meters, a city carved into the Greenland ice sheet. And powering all of it was something the world had never seen before. The PM-2A, the first portable nuclear reactor ever deployed. Not in a facility, not in a laboratory, underneath a glacier. And it worked. For 33 months, that reactor hummed beneath the ice, powering lights, heating tunnels, keeping 200 people alive in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. Then in 1964, they shut it down and pulled it out. Not because it failed, but because something else had. The ice itself was the problem. Engineers had assumed the glacier beneath Camp Century was essentially static, a frozen foundation they could build on and forget. Ice core samples told a different story. The glacier wasn't standing still. It was moving. And not slowly, not gradually. It was moving far faster than anyone had calculated. The ground they had tunneled through, reinforced, and buried a nuclear reactor inside was never really ground at all. Ice doesn't behave like rock or steel. It flows, slowly, relentlessly, under its own immense weight. It deforms. Engineers had accounted for movement, but not for this. The ice sheet was viscoelastic, meaning it could bend and creep like a viscous liquid over time, even while feeling solid underfoot, and the tunnels were feeling it. By mid-1962, the ceiling of the reactor room had dropped 5 feet. Not cracked, not shifted slightly. 5 full feet, pressed downward by a glacier that answered to no blueprint. That wasn't just a structural inconvenience. Every inch of deformation meant resources diverted, schedules disrupted, and crews sent in to shore up what the ice kept quietly dismantling. The tunnel network, hundreds of feet of carved passage, equipment, living quarters, the reactor room itself. All of it existed inside a medium that was constantly, invisibly moving. Repairs could slow the damage. They couldn't stop it. And beneath every patch and reinforcement was the same unresolved question: how long before the ice wins? But here was the brutal irony. The engineers who designed this city under the ice had built their calculations on a fundamental assumption: that the ice sheet would hold, that it would behave, that it would stay. What they discovered instead was that the Greenland ice cap was not a static platform. It was moving, shifting under its own enormous weight, constantly, relentlessly, in ways their models had never accounted for. The numbers they had trusted, the projections they had staked the entire project on, were wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong. And the ice made that clear almost immediately. Within 2 years, the tunnels began to deform. The walls buckled, the ceilings sagged. The network they had carved so precisely into the Greenland ice sheet was being crushed, slowly, relentlessly, by the very medium it was built inside. The missiles were never deployed. The base that was supposed to hide a nuclear arsenal beneath a frozen landscape couldn't even hold its own shape, but abandoning the base didn't mean cleaning it up. When the military walked away, they left behind 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, PCB contamination, and radioactive waste, all of it sealed beneath the ice. Not decommissioned, not removed, just buried and forgotten. The assumption was that the ice sheet would hold it there forever, that it would simply swallow the evidence and never let go. And so it ended. Not with a decommissioning ceremony, not with a strategic decision made in some distant office. The ice itself decided. What had been engineered as a permanent military foothold became the Cold War's first major infrastructure failure, driven not by politics, not by budget, but by the raw, indifferent power of nature. The ice sheet didn't care about deterrence. It didn't care about secrecy. It simply moved. But when the soldiers left, they didn't take everything with them. Deep beneath the ice, the base was simply sealed off. Left behind were 200,000 liters of diesel fuel, polychlorinated biphenyls, and radioactive waste. No retrieval operation, no cleanup. The assumption was straightforward. The ice would hold it forever. That it would compress, shift, and bury every last trace so deep that none of it would ever matter again. But the ice isn't holding. Climate models now predict that by 2090, rising temperatures could thaw the very glacier that was supposed to serve as a permanent vault. And when that happens, the diesel, the PCBs, the radioactive waste, all of it resurfaces. Not buried, not gone, just waiting. What was engineered as a solution is quietly becoming a threat, and the timeline is no longer abstract. It's measurable, it's approaching. For decades, the ice was the plan. It was the vault, the shield, the keeper of secrets. The Cold War logic was simple. Bury it deep enough, freeze it solid enough, and the ice does the work for you. But that same ice is now the threat. The very material chosen to hide a military legacy is slowly losing its grip. What was once a solution is becoming the problem. The ice that locked everything away is now preparing to give it all back. But here's what no one can say with confidence. When? The models that track ice movement carry uncertainty built into their core. The timeline isn't fixed. It could be sooner than projected. It could be later. That window of unknowing is itself part of the story. We're not watching a countdown with a clear number on the clock. We're watching a process that operates on its own terms, indifferent to our predictions. The ice doesn't care about our models. It never did. What we have now that we didn't have then is eyes in orbit. Satellites track the ice sheet's movement continuously. Its flow, its shifts, its slow, relentless pressure. That kind of monitoring could have told engineers exactly how the tunnels would deform, exactly how the ice would close in. The data existed in the ice all along. We just had no way to read it. And now, as the climate shifts and the ice continues to thin, that question becomes impossible to ignore. Whatever was left behind, the equipment, the waste, the infrastructure abandoned beneath the sheet, it hasn't gone anywhere. It's been waiting. The ice that once seemed permanent enough to bury secrets forever is no longer behaving that way, which means at some point, what was hidden may not stay hidden. The glacier doesn't forget. It just moves slowly. And right now, it's moving faster than anyone planned. And that's the deeper irony of Project Iceworm. The ice wasn't just the location. It was the strategy. The entire concept depended on the glacier being stable, predictable, permanent. But the glacier had its own logic. It shifted, compressed, and slowly swallowed everything built inside it. The Cold War planners thought they were using the environment. In the end, the environment won. What's striking is that the signs were always there. Today, satellites can monitor ice sheet movement with extraordinary precision, tracking shifts, measuring pressure, detecting instability across vast frozen distances. Had that capability existed decades earlier, the slow creep of the ice, the compression, the tunnel collapse, all of it could have been anticipated. The failure wasn't just structural, it was a failure of visibility. The engineers weren't blind to the challenges, but they were working without the tools that might have told them the ice would never cooperate. But here is the uncomfortable reversal. The same ice that swallowed the base, that buried it and sealed it away from the world, is now giving it back, slowly, relentlessly. What the cold once preserved in silence, a warming climate is beginning to uncover. The tunnels, the waste, the remnants of an abandoned ambition, none of it went away. It was simply waiting. And the ice that was once an obstacle has become, in its retreat, something far more unsettling. A door opening on its own. What began as a question about why the ice moved has become something far larger. The engineers measured drift, the scientists tracked tunnels, but no one fully calculated what happens when the ice that buried the secret starts to let it go. The cold was never just a setting, it was the lock. And now, with every degree of warming, that lock turns a little further. The mystery of the ice was never separate from the crisis of the ice. They were always the same story, and yet resolution has never fully arrived. Decades later, the questions that defined Project Iceworm still hang in the air. Unanswered, unresolved, buried beneath a sheet of ice that refuses to stay still. The Greenland ice sheet keeps moving, keeps shifting, grinding slowly in ways that confound prediction. Whatever was left behind down there, whatever was sealed away and forgotten, it hasn't stayed put. The ice won't allow it. And that's where the Cold War stops being history. Because as the climate warms and the ice retreats, whatever was buried under that glacier doesn't stay buried. A secret sealed away decades ago becomes something else entirely. Not a relic, but a risk. What was once hidden by design may soon be exposed by nature. The Cold War created the problem. The warming planet may be the thing that finally brings it to the surface. Two forces are now on a collision course, one buried in the past, one accelerating through the present. When the ice finally gives way, whatever remains beneath won't just be a footnote in Cold War history. It will be a living consequence. Chemical, radioactive, real. The glacier kept the secret. The question now is whether the world is ready for what it's been keeping. This was Project Iceworm. A plan buried under ice, and a legacy that may not stay buried forever. If you want more briefings like this, subscribe. There are still many operations like this, waiting to be uncovered.